Hey everyone. I wanted to share a little bit about what I'm doing right now because it's kind of interesting. I have some posts on Instagram and Facebook, but I kind of wanted to describe it a little better about what's happening here. So some of you may know that I'm going to be at Quilt Market in Houston this year. It's at the end of October. If you're going to be there, please come visit me. And if you have a local quilt shop that you like to frequent, let them know that I'm going to be there if they're going to be there, and I love to talk to them. So part of Quilt Market is having a booth, right? And you kind of want to attract attention. So I have taken my textile that you've probably seen before. This is my usual textile with the two different sizes of pieces and the stitching. But I'm scaling it up to drape the top of my booth with it. So what I did was, let me move this down a little bit. So here's my typical piece right here. This is, I think it's 1.5 by 2.25. And what I did was that I just blew it up. It's not precise, actually. I didn't keep the same ratio of length to width. Just generally the same shape. But this piece is, I think it's about 12 times the size of this, the surface area of this piece here. So everything in this textile is just expanded and scaled up, which makes it very, very interesting. I've never done this before. The other part that makes this a very interesting project is that, as you can imagine, I can't use the usual thread that I would use on my textiles here. It's just not big enough, right? So I had to get something bigger, and this is just yarn. This is yarn for knitting. I chose the value yarn because I figured I was going to have to be using a lot of it. I just wanted to see what I could do with it. And so it's much larger. Gives the impression of the same stitching, but just on a larger scale. And these stitches here on my textile are normally about, I would say, 1/4 of an inch, maybe sometimes even smaller. But in this case, I've expanded them and they're probably about 7/8 of an inch. I don't think they're quite an inch, but they're very large. And I also expanded the spacing. And in order to use this yarn, most of you know, normally I would just take my usual thread, stick it in my mouth, and flatten the end and stick it into the needle. But I have talked to you guys about these clover embroidery needle threaders. And in this case, I have to do that. So don't stick this in your mouth. I already did it. It's really kind of gross. But I wanted to try it. The needle that I am using is, so I don't know, maybe in the future this will change, but this is a carpet needle. At least that's what the packaging said. So the eye is much larger than my usual needle. Let me see there. So I'm going to use my needle threader here, put the piece, the hook, not the hook, but the loop on the needle threader through the eye. You're still going to have to be a little careful here because it's still very large yarn. And so I still flatten the end with my finger and then put it through the loop. It may not want to go through completely, which is fine. See, I'm having a little trouble here. But the goal is to just get it all the way through. See, it looks kind of ugly. That's fine. We're just going to trim that off. So I have my yarn through my embroidery, my clover embroidery needle threader here. And then I don't leave too much of a tail here. I'm going to pull it through and it works perfectly. Take the needle threader off. Pull this down a little bit. And there you go. So the method that I use to perform the stitching is almost exactly the same as what I would do for a smaller size textile. One of the issues, though, is that using this carpet needle, the head up here On my usual needle, the whole thing is relatively the same width. But up here, this is wider than the tip. So as I'm stitching and trying to pull it out, it is more difficult. I'm not going to lie, it is harder. But everything else stays the same. You know, here I've had to get used to the wide stitching. So I'm still getting used to that. But same thing applies. I go much slower. So I've only gone through twice here. I'm gonna go ahead and pull it out. And like I said, this is harder to do. The needle doesn't come through as easily. So I had to switch needle pullers because I made the mistake of putting lotion on my hands before doing this, and that made my needle puller slippery. So I was saying, it is more difficult to pull these through. I pull from the bottom, pull one layer at a time, and so now it's free. This is not something where I'm able to do, you know, many layers of fabric on the needle, but it's not bad. The effect is really kind of cool. And also just remember, if your yarn is stretchy, you really want to make sure you pull back on each stitching so that it doesn't pucker as much. So I'll have more photos about this. I'm not quite finished yet. I have 2 large pieces to do. So I hope you'll keep watching. Thanks.